Now, the biggest football story, I think, ever, possibly in England, broke over the last few days. Manchester City have been found guilty by UEFA of breaching the financial fair play rules. They have been suspended from playing in the Champions League for the next 2 seasons. They've been fined £25 million sterling. It's a devastating blow for this project. And we're joined now by John Giles and Liam Brady to discuss that. And, of course, to discuss the weekend's football and tonight's game between Chelsea and Manchester United. Liam, it's as long ago as 2005 that Arsene Wenger talked about financial doping and was very critical. At the time, I think he was critical of Abramovich. But the classic example of financial doping, as it were, is Manchester City. And what's been revealed this weekend is astonishing in the scale of the money they've spent, and indeed their sort of refusal to cooperate with UEFA, which has led to this severe penalty. What about the consequences? And what about Wenger's foresight, Liam, at a time when Arsenal were trying to build a new stadium, at the same time remain, as they were then, one of the big sides, the top sides in England?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was referring to the fact that Arsenal were trying to do it properly, trying to actually generate bigger resources, bigger finances by having a stadium full with 60,000 people, by having all the things that go to do with a new stadium, like naming rights. It's called the Emirates Stadium and so forth. Whereas there have been other clubs, and Man City is probably the prime example, have been breaking the rules by inflating the sponsorship they receive from companies that are from Abu Dhabi, and they're actually paying probably 10, maybe even 20 times the going rate for the various sponsorships. I think Wenger recognised that this was something that had to be addressed all those years ago, but it's taken till now, and it's probably only taken till now because those emails were leaked that were flying about between the Man City executives were leaked by a German newspaper, or found by a German newspaper and exposed then, and I think UEFA had to do something about it because it was in the public domain.
Yes, that's right. And John, the German magazine Der Spiegel was part of the process here. They published these emails and other material. There was a whistleblower, Rui Pinto, a 31-year-old Portuguese cyber wizard. But there was also, John, the emails that Manchester City had to hand over during this investigation to UEFA. And what it shows really is a complete disregard for the rules that football has. And as Liam pointed out, one of the easiest ways of doing that is to inflate your sponsorship deals. This was really classically an attempt to buy trophies and to build a club on petrodollars, and to hell with UEFA, to hell with the Premier League. It's a big shock, though, John, in football terms, isn't it?
Oh, very big, Eamon. If you break the rules, and there was always a suspicion that rules would be broken in this particular aspect of the game, Eamon. But it's been revealed now in a big way, and it's very, very serious consequences for Manchester City in what they were doing. But there again, if you break the rules in the manner in which they've been breaking them, Eamon, then you have to pay the price for it.
Yeah, and for Guardiola, they are going to appeal Manchester City to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland. It's unlikely, we're told, that the Court of Arbitration will overturn it. There is a possibility they might reduce it to 1 year. But the point for Guardiola, for Aguero, who's 32, for Guardiola, who went there really principally to win the Champions League, I think, and to build this super club. People like De Bruyne and Sterling, even 1 year, and it would really, you're talking about 2 years, without European football, without the prospect of it, it gets in your head, John, doesn't it? They might want to, Guardiola certainly want to go.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he probably will, but the consequences are that if they've broken the rules in the manner in which they did, are they going to be? Can they afford now to pay the players that the money that they're paying them now, or attract the players that they would want to continue to do what they were doing? So it's very big, huge consequences for the immediate future, never mind the long-term future, because all the Manchester City players, as we know, would be on big money. Whether Guardiola would want to stay under those conditions, I think anybody in football would doubt that that's what he would want to do, because if he has to sell his best players and he can't get players in as well, then I can't see much point in him staying there. So that's how serious it is now, or it looks at the moment anyway.
Yeah, the Sunday Times reporting yesterday, Liam, that Kevin De Bruyne is on 340,000 a week. He also gets £1 million bonus on top of that if they qualify for the Champions League. But the bigger picture here is Pep Guardiola, and they need a rebuild anyway of the team. Would he stay? Will he stay? And if he goes and, say, Raheem Sterling, who's 25, wants to go, Aguero, it really does bring into question the whole project.
Well, it does, yeah. Guardiola's looked to me, Eamon, as if he's lost his drive in recent months. He just seems to me to be a little bit ill at ease in his job at the moment. I don't know whether he knew this was on its way.
He did.
I'd say probably all the executives at the club and all the big people at the club knew this was going to happen, and they were going to get punished severely. But he's kind of looked a bit fed up to me in recent months, and I wouldn't be surprised if he takes another one of those breaks of his, where he goes and goes away from the game for about a year or 2 years, and then comes back in at obviously another club where he's going to have a chance of winning things. He's managed Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City. He's not just going to go anywhere.
No,
it'll have to be a club that will give him the chance to win a Champions League and the domestic league. But it has got serious repercussions, and agents are going to use this to their own advantage. Agents of the players, I mean, who are the big stars at Man City, like De Bruyne, like Sterling, like Aguero. It'll be interesting to see what the policy is coming out of Manchester City now. As John says, they're not going to be able to sling the money that they've been doing before, because they're under scrutiny now about everything that they do, and rightly so. They've been breaking the rules left, right, and centre. They've been breaking the rules as well as young players too. How they're getting young players to the club.
Yes,
they've been fined by that for that in recent seasons. So there's a huge question mark over the regime now at Man City, and what the people in Abu Dhabi are going to do about this, really.
Yeah, and I can tell you and John that Soriano and Barigistan, two of Guardiola's friends, really, from Barcelona, are running the club. Soriano in particular is hands-on. They were fined 49 million euros in 2014, and as you rightly point out, Liam, they have broken the rules in relation to approaching young players as well. John, if it's 2 years and the ban holds, and I can tell you both actually that because of the closeness of Guardiola to the two boys who run the club, he will have known Guardiola, John, that this was coming down the line. And I would agree with Liam. I have detected in him at times this year a kind of resignation. He's sitting on the bench. He's kind of head in his hand and not really looking happy.
Well, I mean, if you were in his position and you knew what was coming down the line, You wouldn't be happy. Nobody would be happy, and it would certainly. You couldn't be full of optimism when you know this is going to happen, and the whole thing is spoiled. I mean, it's just totally ruined now. What he bought into coming to Manchester City is ruined. There's no doubt about it, Eamon. If it's as serious, and it is as serious as you say, you've got good information on it of what's going to happen. If you were in Guardiola's position, Eamon, and you knew what's going to happen, and you can't buy players, and players have to go, it's a total disaster and a mess for the club. So I certainly could understand why he would be down in the dumps. He couldn't be full of optimism in the situation that the club are in now, and certainly in his situation.
Yeah, and just another point, John, about Arsene Wenger and his foresight. I mean, Wenger took an awful lot of stick in his latter years at Arsenal, but he foresaw this as long ago as, it's 15 years ago, 2005. He foresaw the problems that football would face if they didn't draw a line in the sand and say no more of this stuff, guys, or at least make people obey the rules, abide by the regulations. He saw this coming, and he's only one sort of coach, and one great coach who suffered from the abuse of power and the abuse of the rules by people like, this is a state, a petrodollar state, taking on the Premier League. What chance have they got? What chance have United got, for that matter, when you're faced with that kind of stuff?
Well, it's totally wrong, Eamon. I'm not so sure that when Wenger made his stand, it was actually against Manchester City.
No, it was against Abramovich.
So they weren't the first to do it, and you don't know how the other clubs did or did not do it over the years, Eamon. It's totally wrong. I mean, no matter who was doing it, it was totally wrong. I mean, Wenger was a man of principle, all right. He did pay the price in a big way, Eamon, for what for his future at Arsenal. There's no doubt about that, and he was a very honourable man to do what he did. But it happens, Eamon. It wouldn't be the first time we've had it. Well, it's the first time we've had as big a subject in football as now, because the game has got richer and richer, and the villains have got bigger and bigger. So Manchester City will pay the price for it now, Eamon. I think there's no doubt about that.
Liam, just to say that it isn't just as it was in Abramovich's case, an individual, a very wealthy individual. This is a state. This is a country with oil, and they're taking on UEFA. They're taking on the regulations. But the one thing to say as well is, for the players and for Guardiola and for the fans of Manchester City, it's a shocking and cruel blow.
Yeah, well, it puts question marks about all the achievements they've had in recent seasons, doesn't it? It's tainted those things, Eamon.
Yeah.
Without any doubt. I was just reading, a couple of articles like Liverpool and Brendan Rodgers lost out on a league by 2 points to them.
Yes.
Now, if they had been following the rules as they should have been, maybe Liverpool would have had that title a good few years ago, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
All those kind of things have been. It's shameful, really, and I'm glad that UEFA have taken this stand. But I don't think they probably would have done if it hadn't have been exposed by that German magazine. I think UEFA have had a similar problem with PSG as well.
Yes, they have.
Where they're owned by Qatar people, and they've been able to buy the likes of Neymar for millions, and we know that they can't possibly have that money from revenue from the French league, because it's simply not that big. But they seem to have been treated leniently, whereas City have had the whole thing chucked at them, because I think it's in the public domain, what was actually going on.
Yeah, and I should say to our listeners and to both of you, that the reason UEFA have been so particularly rigorous on this is that Manchester City fought them all the way. They did not cooperate with the investigation, and it had to be seen. Whereas In the case of PSG, they escaped on a technicality, but they also, they got away with it, but they have the World Cup. So let's move on, because we'll have to worry about that next year. Just to move on to football, John, you saw Arsenal, you both saw Arsenal yesterday, John. It's an interesting team they have now. I mean, they won 4-0.
Yeah.
The new coach he's escaped from Manchester City. What has he walked into? Although they have got some good young players, and it was a good win in the end.
Well, in the end it was, Newcastle gave as good as they got in the first half, but ran out of steam, and Arsenal finished well and won easily in the end. So it was a badly needed win for them. It's a new job to Arteta, to be fair. It's not easy coming in to change something around. It take a little bit of time to do so. But they finished up well yesterday. They won well in the end.
Yeah, Liam Mikel Arteta, former Arsenal player. You know him very well. We haven't spoken to you actually since he got the job. It's a big and a difficult job at the moment. Yesterday's wins takes them into the top half, but he's plenty of work to do, but some good and interesting young players to work with.
Yeah, I think he's shown that he has the mettle for the job. He left a few big names out yesterday. We don't know what quite on with Lacazette, but he was dropped, and the young lad Eddie Nketiah played up front. So that was a big call. I think he's setting his stall out to say, look, this I'm the boss here, and you've all got to pull in the direction that I want you to do. Otherwise you won't be part of my plans. He's still going to need, for Arsenal to challenge the top, at the top of this division, he's going to need an awful lot of money in the transfer market to put right the team. It was a good win yesterday, as John says, but I thought Newcastle were very, very poor. And in fact, I watched Tottenham and Aston Villa, and Aston Villa was shocking. I don't know whether you watched that.
I didn't see that
They
match.
were terrible as well. There's really some bad teams in this Premier League at the moment. And with Manchester City, what's happened to Manchester City, it gives Arsenal an outside chance, of maybe getting into that fifth spot,
Yes.
If they can put a run together, and obviously winning yesterday as they did will be a good foundation, maybe the start of a winning run of 3 or 4 games. And if you get 3 or 4 games consecutive wins, you'll be on the coattails of Chelsea and Spurs for that 4th spot.
And Sheffield United, just before.
Yeah, they're up there. If you're any team in the top half of the division, and Manchester City are going to get this punishment, you're looking at that top 4. You're looking at saying, if you finish 5th, it could very well mean that you play in the Champions League next season. I
just ask you briefly, Liam, about Marinelli, the Brazilian winger or wide player. He looks amazing. Is he as good as I've?
Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen him in few. What he's got, he's got real goal about him.
Yeah.
And he takes his chances. And for a young lad, he shows remarkable calmness in front of the goal, and he really does well. And this boy Saka is playing left back for them. He's come up through the academy. He's playing really well too. So there are some good young players that Arteta has to work with, but he's still got the legs of Ozil, and he's still got Mustafi at the back and things like that. And I don't think with those guys in the team, you're going to challenge the very top. So he has to be helped with money. Now,
John, tonight, Chelsea, Manchester United, it's a very big match just in the context of what Liam was talking about. And also, the mystery about Paul Pogba continues. He's only played 8 games this season, and he's making a holy show of the club, isn't he? And really letting Solskjaer down, the head coach.
Yeah, well, Solskjaer's been too soft with him, Eamon.
Yeah.
Now, whether he's been under orders, Solskjaer, to do what he's doing remains to be seen. But, he should have been out. He
Yeah.
can't behave the way he got his age in the papers all the time. Raiola talking about, well, he wants to go to a big club. Big club, Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yep.
Just not doing his stuff. As you said, many matches, eight matches all year.
Yeah.
Is he injured? Is he not injured? Where is he? Is he on holidays and all that carry on? This is a big club, and you couldn't imagine this happening in Ferguson's time.
No.
Could you imagine him at Liverpool doing that now with Klopp?
No way. Absolutely
No
no
way. You can't go run a club in the way that particular thing is going on. It's absolutely ridiculous. Get him out of the place, and that's it.
Yeah, and just in terms of tonight's game, John, it's a big game for Frank Lampard and Chelsea as well. I think he's made a really great start as a coach at Derby and at Chelsea, Frank. But they've had a few bad results. They've got young players who can be a bit inconsistent. It's a big match for both clubs in the context of what Liam was saying. Champions League without Manchester City in the frame, it's open to a few more clubs now.
Yeah, it's a big game, and always a big claim in the last few years for Chelsea and Manchester United. Anyway, Eamon, I think over the transfer window there, he wasn't too happy. I don't think he got any backing really. Lampard, he came out publicly and he was a bit disappointed. Eamon, he's doing well with what he has. A lot of young players, as you say, in the club. Just talk about some of the experienced players going out, but I don't think he got to do what he needed to do or wants to do in this particular window. So he's struggling. He's doing the best. He's doing the best he possibly can, I think, with the players that he has at the moment. So he has to be backed to get where he needs to get in his head, and that hasn't happened so far. But a big game for them tonight, the two teams.
Liam, your impression of Frank Lampard's start in coaching?
Yeah, I've been very impressed, Eamon. I think he's handled the job well. He goes about it the right way. I think he concentrates on his own team. He's not commenting on other things. So in the media, I think he's been impressive as well.
Yes.
And that's a big part of the job, obviously, to be able to protect yourself. So I think he's done a good job. He's brought on a lot of the good young players that Chelsea have on their books. He hasn't had, as John says, he hasn't had money to spend so far. I think there's question marks about Abramovich's enthusiasm for the club and the Premier League at the moment. I don't think he's that interested. I think he's probably become a seller rather than a buyer of players. So it's going to be difficult for Lampard to achieve the things that they've done in the past. But if he gets them into the Champions League in the top four this season with the young players that he's introduced, I think it'll be seen as a fine job. And
just your response to the Pogba thing, Liam, it's really extraordinary. He didn't go to Marbella where they had a warm weather training camp last week. I saw him on a bike in Dubai. And just to go to what John said, no club or self-respecting coach or club would allow a player to behave like this, would they?
No, it's a difficult situation, because you can't just cast them aside. You want to get your money back. You're talking about a player that's worth probably in the region of 100 million. I wouldn't pay money for him. I wouldn't have him at a football club, but somebody might pay that kind of money. And I think that's what Manchester United are doing. They're talking him up. They're not being critical of him because they want to keep his market value, and they'll get him out when they get a good offer, I think, and I think that's what's going on there.
Yeah. Just a final question for both of you. At the weekend, Mick McCarthy revealed that when he took the job as manager for the Irish team, he didn't know that Robbie Keane was part of the deal and had been given a 4-year contract by John Delaney. It was one of John Delaney's last major decisions. I want to ask you first, John, about this and about the implication for Stephen Kenny. Stephen will become our new international team manager or head coach, whatever they call it, when Mick McCarthy leaves after our interest in the European Championship ends. Robbie getting a 4-year contract from John Delaney, there's no way Stephen Kenny can accept that he inherits Robbie Keane from Mick McCarthy on his staff.
Well, I don't think it's anything to do with Stephen Kenny. He didn't pick him. He didn't give him the contract.
No.
I think Stephen, when he gets the job, will pick his own staff, and it's the FAI's position, and whatever that might be, to honour the contract to Robbie Keane or not. But I don't think Stephen Kenny is under any pressure to employ Robbie Keane.
No.
I think that's the most important thing.
Right. Liam, there's no criticism of Robbie Keane here implied at all, but you were on Trapattoni's staff, you couldn't have a situation where Stephen Kenny walks into the job and inherits Robbie Keane because he's on a 4-year contract, could you?
No, I agree with John. I think it'll be up to Stephen Kenny to decide, who's going to be on his staff. And if Robbie's got a 4-year contract, the FAI will have to honour it. If Stephen Kenny, I know Robbie quite well. I think if Stephen Kenny said to Robbie, "Look, Robbie, I don't really want to use you going forward," I don't think Robbie Keane would have a problem with it.
No,
he knows the game. Yeah, he knows football. But this is a case of John Delaney trying to please everybody.
Yes.
He came up with this strange kind of managerial selection where he put Mick McCarthy in because he needed someone that was going to be able to get the grips with the job straight away, whereas Stephen Kenny had a question mark. But there was a lot of public support for Stephen Kenny getting the job because of how he's worked in the League of Ireland, and I think this was John Delaney's solution to keep everybody on side. And part of that was giving Robbie Keane, who was one of the most popular players that we've ever had, a part in the setup, well, I don't know how it's going to pan out. I didn't read this, Eamon. What is Mick McCarthy saying?
Well, Mick said he didn't know anything about Robbie. He more or less said that he was obliged to take Robbie on his coaching staff, and he said he'd no problem with it. But he didn't know that Robbie had a 4-year contract. Now, I mean, we all know Robbie, and I mean, he's been a great player for Ireland, and I like Robbie, as you do. The thing is, he's not the kind of lad who's going to sit in the corner and be quiet. He's a big, bubbly personality. He'd have a lot to say, but there's no way Stephen Kenny should be obliged. That's the only point I was trying to establish with both of you. I mean, no disrespect to Robbie Keane. He's a terrific lad.
Yeah, no problem with that, Eamon. It's just a situation that Mick McCarthy was inherited him from John Delaney, giving him the 4-year contract, and Stephen Kenny's the same. It's not Robbie's fault in any way whatsoever. He's only doing what's best for himself. But Stephen Kenny has to do what's best for what he thinks is best for himself, and it could well be that he doesn't want to employ Robbie Keane. But I think everybody that's in the game, Eamon, will understand that. I think Robbie Keane will understand it, and I think Stephen Kenny will understand it. So it's not a downer on Robbie. Robbie, you say, has been a great player for the Irish team, and that's the situation. But Robbie Keane's been in the game long enough that if Stephen Kenny says to him, "Look, Robbie, think the world of you, but I'm not going to use you on my staff," that's the end of it.
Okay, just at the end of this podcast, to you, John, in particular, but also to Liam, and on my own behalf, just to express my sadness at the passing of one of the great characters in football. Harry Gregg was goalkeeper at Manchester United when you played there, John. He was in the Munich air crash. He went back twice into that burning wreckage and saved people, Bobby Charlton and Matt Busby among them. It's a very sad day, John, for you, I'm sure, as it is for me. I knew Harry very well, and sometimes in recent years we used to talk. A marvellous man, a big character, a great spirit.
Yeah, he was a very, very brave goalkeeper, Eamon. Very brave, like most great goalkeepers have to be brave, and he was. And as you mentioned there, he showed his bravery in a different way in the Munich air disaster. He was a big character and a big player.
Liam, somebody that you wouldn't be old enough to know, but you would have known the legend of Harry.
Yeah, I was a Manchester United supporter when I was a kid, and he was a big part of, me growing up, and he was the goalkeeper in the early 60s and so forth. Alex Stepney took over from him, didn't
Yes,
he? But he was a great Manchester United player and a man.
Okay, Liam and John, thank you both very much for joining us this morning.